So today's talk is inspired by a Beatles song, which you probably already heard us practicing prior to hearing know that. George Harrison wrote in his autobiography, I, Me, Mine, Here Comes the Sun was written at the time when Apple was getting like school, where we had to go and be businessmen. Sign this, sign that. Anyway, it seemed as if winter in England goes on forever, but the time spring came, you really deserve it. So one day I decided I was going to sag off Apple and went over to Eric Clapton's house. He just is going over to Eric Clapton's house. The relief of not having to go see all those dopey accountants was wonderful. And I walked around the garden with one of Eric's acoustic guitars and wrote, Here Comes the Sun. And I thought we all could relate. Now I know that not all of us are big fans of the actual sun, but we're using it as a metaphor as much as the actual sun experience. So it's a metaphor. And so I was looking, sometimes you go down the rabbit hole when you start researching these things, and there's infinite amount of knowledge on the internet, right? So they actually said that that particular year that the winter was especially dark, and then that April when he wrote the song, like it was exceptionally more sunshine than usual. So there was sort of a perfect confluence to bring this together. But I thought, I was thinking about that, and yes, now we're like a whole month past the solstice, which is exciting, right? Because the sun is coming, even though it does seem still pretty dark, right? I mean, I came over here to set up the tables and stuff yesterday, and I, was going out, and I was like, man, gosh, it's dark. What time is it? It was 7 o'clock. And I was like, oh, because it's not really that late. It just seems like it is because it's just so deeply dark, yeah. And which, we can have a whole nother talk about that in 6 months, and how about the opposite end of it. So we all have our strategies about how to get through the dark times, whether we're talking literally dark times or metaphorically dark times, right? And our marking and keeping track of this is an ancient ritual. Some of our oldest existing remnants of cultures past mark the sun. Stonehenge, ruins, and the Mayan ruins, all these, they mark these things with precision. It's pretty amazing. And so we've been wanting to keep track of this for a long time. And what I found was interesting is, like, when you think about it, like all of the natural phenomenon that now science can explain to us why thunder and lightning happens, and we understand why earthquakes happen, and we understand why tornadoes, we understand all of this stuff, right? We understand why the sun, the time the sun is up comes and goes. They didn't understand why, but they knew that it did. And it did it with regularity, and they understood that. And there's something about faith in that, right? Because even though they didn't understand why, they knew that it did, because it had every time before that. And so it's going to continue to do that. And they would celebrate that it still did it. But I think that they probably, after a while, had a pretty good idea that it was going to. And so that brings me to faith. And Charles Fillmore, y'all know who he is, right? He said, faith is the receiving power of the mind linked with the power to shape substance. Substance being the energy of the universe. We might call it, the quantum field or something like that now, but they didn't have those words then. And so you may have noticed that the ribbons around our candles are a dark lovely dark blue, and they match my shirt. Isn't that a surprise? So the color for faith is dark blue. And the colors were not something Charles Fillmore came up with. They came along later, but it's sort of a tradition in Unity. So this whole year, or probably in years going forth, every month we'll change the color. So we'll have a power of the month. So this month is faith. And you'll get to know what's coming up as we go along. And I've already got the pretty little ribbons. So how do we grow faith? Because that's our theme for the month. I know we're halfway through the month, but that's okay. We're not doing this in any particular order. How do we grow faith? That's a good thing to talk about all the time. And guess what? In the revealing word, there's a section, faith, how cultivated. It's like a how-to manual. So this is what Charles writes in here. The vacillating allegiance of Peter to Jesus illustrates the growth of faith in one who has not developed this faculty. Faith is built up through denial of all doubt and fear and continuous affirmations of loyalty to the divine idea. Faith is built up through denial of all doubt and fear and continuous affirmations of loyalty to the divine idea, the higher self. One must have faith in one's spiritual capacity and depend on it in the face of adverse appearances. So even though it's really dark out, we know the sun is coming, right? Metaphorically. So let's unpack this a little bit, because some of us know more about Peter and the Bible than others, but in the Gospels, Peter has a reputation for really understanding what's going on and being full of faith. Remember, he's the one who got out of the boat and walked on water, right? But then he's also the one who started to sink because he flaked. There's no better term for it. That's what he did. And so that's kind of what Peter's about. In the Gospels, Peter's representing this faith of getting it and not getting it, and doing that kind of faith cha-cha, which is, I think probably we can all relate to that at some level, right? But, when we were in Bible class on Wednesday, we were looking at Peter in Acts. Peter in Acts is different than Peter in the Gospels. Peter in Acts, at least in the section we were reading, gets it. He stands firm in that faith. He is healing people, and he's admonishing people for not having faith, and he said, hey, we believe in God and it's going to work out. So he's become much more mature in his faith. Another good reason for Peter to represent faith. Faith is, so in Charles, he says, faith is built up by denial of doubt. This isn't like denial like the walls are blue in here. The walls are blue. No, not that kind of denial. I think it'd be really hard to have blue walls if we have blue chairs. But anyway, not that kind of denial, but in the denial of saying, that's not, just because this thing has happened doesn't mean that's the final answer. That's not the permanent truth of who I am or this situation. At this moment I may be experiencing a pain or a hurt somewhere in my body. That doesn't mean that that's the final answer. I am not that. That's how we use a denial. We say, that's not that's not who I am as a spiritual being. That's just the outer experience. That's how we do. So when we deny what is not true, capital T true, and we come back to what we know is true, that's how we grow our faith. Even when it doesn't seem easy. And so one of the tools that we, you know, what I'm gonna say, right? So we use prayer meditation as one of our tools to bring us back to the truth, right? Because when we take time to be still, we can kind of be like, oh yeah, that all the hustle, the hustle and bustle stuff is just commentary. And so you all know I went for a spiritual retreat last weekend, and just 22 hours in the silence. That's what it ended up being, because the highway was something else. And even in that amount of time, which is really not that much time, but it's a lot more time than usual, where there's no internet, no easy distractions. I had some spiritual, some inspirational things to read, and I had my mandala book, and I had the silence. And sleeping. Sleeping is okay. You're allowed to sleep if that's what you need. But it only takes up so much of the time, right? And mindfully eating. Often I'm reading a book or something while I'm eating my lunch and stuff, doing other things. So, but I was like, no, just going to be here doing one thing at a time. One thing at a time. And even in that, just a little bit of time, 22 hours, which maybe isn't a little, it seems like a little short period of time. There was an opportunity for me to re-plug in and come back to being more clear about who I am, what I came here to be, and what I don't want to do. Which is good too. And so this is the season, this winter time is the season for renewal. It's always good to take time to renew. But, we think about people, we now have grocery stores that we go to, and we have electric lights and things like that. We're not as plugged into the seasons as the people who came even 100 years before us did, right? But this is the time of quiet. This is the time of renewing. This is the time of rest. This is the time of, making quilts and preparing things and getting, family and doing those kind of things. Because in the spring, it'll be time to plant, and then it'll be time to take care of it, and it'll be time to do all the things and, do all of that, and harvesting in the fall. There's lots of action. This is the time of quiet. So it's nice that faith lines up with the winter time, I think, because it's a time of renewing. So we know that the sun is coming, literally, and we also know that in our faith, that even when we're in a rough time, if we have faith, we know that the metaphorical sun is coming, that this is not a permanent situation, right? But in this time of rest, in this time of, I think I'll just stay home because it's dark and cold outside. I think I'll just stay home. Maybe it's time to take a little more real rest, a little more renewal. Airplane mode is your friend. Just remember to turn it off when you have a call to make, because otherwise it won't work and you'll be confused. So this time is a time for deepening of being, becoming more of that faith. So when the sun comes and it's time to plant the seeds, we are ready to go. Right? Yeah. Allow. So that's my invitation, is for you to allow the deepening of your belief, to know that good is coming through you and to you. Here comes the sun.